Hi Rajiv, how are you doing? All good at your end?
All good. All
Great to see you over here. So I'll just begin with a quick introduction about Rajiv. Rajiv is the partner and investor at Antler. Rajiv has co-founded Urban Ladder, ran it for around 8 years, India's top omnichannel furniture brand, and has raised more than 100 million in venture capital. He has also exited it to Reliance and has been featured 5 times on Fortune 40 under 40 list. It's an honor hosting you here at Xartup, Rajiv. Welcome to Xartup.
Thanks for having me.
That's great. So, beginning with a pretty curious question. So, you had the dream CV of IT Madras, IM Bangalore, and Infosys, Cognizant, PM at Yahoo. So, how did you decide to take a plunge and get started with something which is pretty risky?
I think it was. Most of my life, whether that was at IIT or at IIM, I used to code a lot, and I used to do a bunch of stuff, which was obviously, in the process of creating stuff. So whether that was right in campus, I created a game which was a Carmen San Diego sort of a replica. I also created the intranet within IIMB. And whether that was my first work experiences in Infosys, I had the largest website inside Infosys, right? So I had always somewhere been a creator, I would say. And I think that whole translation of being from a creator to a startup founder, I think while it took me 8 years after my MBA, 4 years at Cognizant and 4 years at Yahoo, it was always something that I guess was waiting to happen. And I just needed to find the right person to do it with and the right idea to do it with, do it in. So I guess I always see it as a matter of time before I did it. So, and that's an important one, right? I mean, I still go back to why we have launched the Antler India College Fellowship. I see a lot of founders starting creating stuff when they're either nowadays at school or in campus, and somewhere that joy of creation will come to the fore sometime, right? It just maybe you work for 4 years, maybe you work for 8 years, you work in startups, somewhere it'll come back, right? So that's why we sort of see that as sort of the first signal or the first point where that'll happen. Of course, it took me 8 years after I graduated to come and start up. And of course, it was about finding the right idea, making sure that the market was big, finding the right co-founder. Ashish and me had done a lot of stuff in campus together in IMB. So I think a lot of other things worked itself out before that happened.
That's interesting. So, when you mentioned about getting a team together, Ashish and you starting out together right from the campus, you had a good bonding among yourselves. So, I'd love to know about how you picked this niche that furniture in India is going to be a booming market in future, and how did you decide to work on this idea?
I think we were, funnily around September, it was almost 10 years back, right? So September 2011, we started thinking of doing something together. The original idea was grocery. And this was the time when there was no big basket, there's no anyone else. And we spent around 1 or 2 months understanding the customer, understanding the need, and even we named a company, on what it would be. The moment we understood the market, we realized that grocery as a space, while it was big, we just were not passionate about. So we used like a 3 criteria thing on what we will start up with, right? One, we said the market has to be big because we're going to spend the next 10 years in something, the market better be big. The second thing we said was we will do something where we were passionate about, right? Grocery was not something that we were passionate about, unfortunately, right? It just felt like, we were buying something, selling something. While obviously there's a lot of challenges to solve, we just were not passionate about. Third is there was a real consumer need, right? And grocery at least ticked off that, and there was a real consumer need. Then we were in the zone that we were going to start up, right? And both of us were sort of looking to move. It had been 4 years for me in my Yahoo experience. He had been doing 4 years. Amar Chitrakatha, he was running the operations. So then we went from one idea to another, which will tick off all 3 boxes, right? Then we went to gourmet food. We looked at something in education, something in energy, something in healthcare. It never ticked off all 3 for both of us, right? And then, I think and this was all within a span of 30 days. Okay, it was not like a long time. This was between September and October of 2011. Then by November, we said, hey, why don't we look at the women as a consumer and let's do everything for the women as a consumer, right? And then we started, Ashish was connected to a bunch of investors, one of whom was Vani, who became our first investor. And Kanwal, who today runs Fireside, he was the first investor we talked to. They sort of gave us some ideas on how to look at it and said that, hey, that's too many things, and Myntra is there, and why don't you pick one segment within women as an audience and go deeper into it? So we then picked home because we felt fashion and apparel and accessories were already, there were enough people sort of looking at it. We felt more passionate about home as sort of the category that we wanted to pick. Then within home, we then went deeper into saying, hey, everyone said that you should start with the easiest category there, which is home decor. And we said, no, we'll start with the toughest category there because that's where the consumer need is the most, right? As I said, we needed something where the market was massive. We needed something where we were passionate about and something where the consumer need was more massive. And we did a lot of consumer research between October and December of 2011 and figured that the consumer need was more massive in furniture as a category, right? So that's what led us to picking furniture. We actually named the company, I remember December 27th or 28th. We took some 48 hours to name the company. We finally arrived at Urban Ladder because we got the domain for $499 and it was available on Facebook and Twitter for free. Obviously one thing led to the other, and finally I think by Jan 1st, 2012, we were clear that okay, this is what it was going to be.
That's an interesting criteria to choose a name, I guess. The cheapest available domain name. Very interesting. So now that we know about your ideation story, you would like to know a bit of numbers. Like in the early days, what were your unit economics look like? Was it profitable from day zero, or how was it like? If you can give us a glimpse of it.
I can see Nandini smiling. Nandini was our first. Nandini is my first team member in Antler in India, as well as the first team member in Urban Ladder in May 2012. So I can see her smiling on your question. So see, I think for us, I think for us, we were very clear that at that time, of course, we didn't raise too much money, right? We raised $1 million, and later on, some of our competitors raised at least 5x more money. So we didn't have the choice of running too much discounts and being crazy on pricing and stuff. We just never had that choice. We always had to make money on every product that we sold, and our fundamental ethos was always that invest into people, invest into foundational operations and supply chain capability, invest into technology, but let's not be just ruthless in giving discounts and stuff. And we prided ourselves on that, right? So we were always operationally positive. But of course, if you look at costs so after marketing costs, we were still positive. But if you look at salaries and just the team costs, of course, that made us negative. So we invested purely in the team and technology capabilities and nothing else, right? And of course, any new investment of a warehouse or whatever else is what. So our first 1 million lasted us, I think, the first 18 months. Today, I don't think 1 million will last anyone more than 6-9 months. And obviously, people raised 3, 4, 5 million also at the start as seed rounds. But at that time, 1 million lasted us 18 months. Of course, did the next fundraise of a $5 million within 12 months because we saw a lot of traction, but we didn't spend the first 1 million for at least 15 months. I don't remember exactly, and we got to a revenue scale of around 25 crores a year, right, with just that money, which was pretty strong at that time.
That's insanely good. So moving forward, how did you scale this up when you saw the early success with Urban Lab, with your business model, with the unit economics, and how did you scale this up eventually?
I think scaling up was on 3-4 axes, right? One is, of course, on products. We launched with only 40-50 products, and slowly but surely we increased the number of categories we got into. We increased the number of products. Literally every month we would launch around 10-15 products. So from 40 products, we got very quickly to around 200 products. Then we expanded on bigger categories as we got more confidence that people were buying 4,000 rupees and 5,000 rupees. Highest ticket size ever in e-commerce, right? People were used to buying 500 and 600. And we started selling products at 4,000. We were also very skeptical. But obviously people started buying 4,000 and 5,000 rupee products. So then we slowly started launching dining tables and beds and sofas. By the first year end, we already had sofas and beds, and people were buying even those 30, 40, 50,000 rupee products on the internet, right? We were very surprised, honestly, right? We didn't anticipate that people would buy all that. So one was obviously product range expansion. The second was marketing channel expansion. So we obviously just spread on word of mouth in the first 3-6 months. We did a bunch of offline initiatives, but over time we also started. We were the first advertiser on Facebook. At that time, Facebook had just opened up its feed on advertising, and we literally sort of understood how the Facebook algorithm ran. And for the first 2 years, all our sales happened via Facebook. We just completely scaled marketing via Facebook. We went from 0 to 1 crore a month, 1 crore to 2 crores a month, completely backed on Facebook, right? Third is, of course, the team. And I think, like I said, Nandini sort of joined us very early. Our team was very small, maybe 10, 15 people till the first year. But then we quickly, as the brand, scaled, I think there's a lot of team members that came on board. We increased the technology team, we increased the marketing team. A lot of it went back to our customer service and our, we didn't, we were only in 3 cities. We actually scaled down the number of cities. We launched all India, but then scaled it down because NPS, the customer satisfaction score, was very important for us. And wherever we had our own operations, the customer satisfaction score was much higher. Wherever it was outsourced, the customer satisfaction score was much lower. So we took a very tough call in the first 45 days to say, let's only service 3 cities. So the first 2 years, we were only in Bombay, Delhi, and Bangalore. And we scaled up the operations teams in those cities, but scaled down deliveries in every other city. And because the customer satisfaction was so high, it was at the NPS, the Net Promoter Score, was at 80 approximately. It helped in everything. It helped with investors. It helped with a lot of our friends saying good things about us. It helped with customers saying good things about us. It helped team members join because they had heard good things about us. So if you get your NPS right, I think scaling can automatically happen. And obviously the team had a big hand in getting that NPS really right. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, if you had a marketing, team, customers, operations, capital. So we raised our second round within 12 months. We raised another $5 million to scale it up further. And of course, scale up in years 1 and 2 happened more consciously with $5-6 million. Years 3 and 4 happened super rapidly because we raised another $70 million suddenly in 7 months in 2014. And if you remember 2014, the India VC ecosystem and the capital ecosystem just completely exploded, right? There was just a lot of capital flowing in. And with that 70 million, then we scaled up crazy more, right? We suddenly then opened up 15 cities. We expanded sourcing from Jodhpur to China. We increased the team size from 35 to 100, and then from 100 to 300 over 2 years. The technology team scaled up from 7 people to 70 people. A lot of craziness happened during that time. Products, marketing, we did TV advertising. So I think it's a function of, and that was the thing, right? When you scale consciously over 2 years, and then when you suddenly scale, 6x over the next 2 years, you also tend to make a lot of mistakes when you hyperscale. And 17, 18, the next 2 years, years 5 and 6 were about unwinding those mistakes, I would say, because we had just scaled up too much too fast in years 3 and 4. So 5 and 6 was a lot about scaling down, and that's something that we had to do to compensate for the scaling up in crazy scaling up in years 3 and 4.
That's insane. So thanks for sharing that amazing growth story. Now that you mentioned you did some mistakes, I'd love to hear those stories if you would be able to share with the founders over here as well. That would be really a good learning experience for us.
Everything where we scaled up, we had to scale down, which means everything where we did well, we also made mistakes, right? So source, I'll just give the example, right? We increased the products from, let's say, 400 to 1,000, and we scaled that up really well. And then when we increased the products from 1,000 to 4,000, we got a lot of bad products, bad design products, bad quality products. So we had to really scale that down, right? Customers just had bad things to say. When we scaled up to 3 cities and 3 to 7 cities, we could do that very well. But when we scaled from 7 cities to 20 cities, some of those newer teams and the newer cities, we could not give the same level of customer satisfaction. So we had to again pull back there. The team, when you're growing from 30 to 100, you can still look for values and culture. But when you're scaling from 100 to 350, you suddenly have this behemoth of an organization, which if you don't put the right kind of OKRs and right kind of organization structures or the right kind of leaders, suddenly we had a leadership team from 4 or 5 people to 15 people, right? So it just became some parts of the organization obviously did not scale the culture at the right level. So that obviously became a challenge as the company, different people talk to different people. I think challenges were, again, marketing, right? Suddenly when we went to TV, we got a new set of customers, and we did not have offline at that time for this new set of customers. So our customer acquisition costs shot through the roof, right? When we tried to scale so much. So I would say we made mistakes in every aspect of business as we scaled up. And that is why I said 17, 18 was, some of it you can stop overnight. A marketing cost, you can literally shut off a new channel or a campaign. But, if you have, inventory of things that are, you need 3 months, you need 6 months to sort of really sell some of that out. You need more time on unwinding certain things, right? You have a big team, and now you have to sort of reduce the team because culturally it's not aligning. You can't do that overnight. You have to sort of let the team sort of move out because you're not able to plan careers for so many people. We moved into a fancy office space. We unwound that and moved into a more lesser cost office space, I would say. So a lot of things that, obviously in that 2 years when you had a lot of capital, you don't realize too much. You had to unwind, and that's precisely what we did in 17, 18. By the time years 5 and 6 ended, I think we were in a far better place where the revenue scale was something very similar to what we had achieved in year 4, actually slightly more. We had also launched offline, and our costs were 20% of the cost that we had in year 4. Right, the revenue scale was similar, but the cost was 80% lesser, which is what we did in 17, 18.
That's interesting. So, Rajiv, I have got a question in the chat box. Like, what were the things that you could have avoided in the early stages of building Urban Clap?
It's not Urban Clap; it is Urban Ladder, first of all.
Urban Ladder.
In the early stages, I wouldn't do anything differently. Everything that we did was right. Like literally everything that we did was right. So I don't think the first 2 years, the early stages, I think where I would unwind a bunch of stuff is probably more in the series, whatever you call it, series BC, years 3 and 4. And that's when I would unwind, and I just talked about some of those mistakes, right, in terms of just scaling too fast without the right kind of systems and processes in place. But outside of that, I don't think I would unwind too many things, to be honest.
Great. So moving forward, let's come to the second part of your life, and you decided to take a plunge from entrepreneurship to being a VC. How was this decision, and your roles and Antler? How has it been like till now?
So it's been pretty natural that way, right? When I sort of, I think I decided to move out after year 7 and 8, right? Because years 7 and 8 were very different in the Urban Ladder journey. And somewhere around year 7 is when I decided I'll sort of move out, because for me personally, I found a lot more of my personal skill set and my personal passion in early stage and more technology, right? And, I was making this decision between October 2019 and March 2020 after I moved out, those 6 months. And really, I sort of, looked at all kinds of opportunities, right? Everything from starting up again to sort of being more an advisor to different startups to even taking on roles in bigger companies, unicorns, and taking on senior roles there to sort of VC. I was actually not even in the mix. I said I'm not going to be a VC when I from 40 to 50, and it's funny how the universe conspires against all your original hypothesis, because I think for me, the reason why I took on this role was 2-3 things, right? One is, of course, in India, there's just not been an institution created in the pre-seed and in the first 12 months of the founder's journey, right? And I was super kicked about building an institution and building a brand in the first 12 months of the founder journey. 2 is building a global platform, right? Antler is there in 15 countries. And really bringing a global platform to India so that Indian founders can build for the world from India was something that I was super excited about. The third is really working with a new set of founders, right? Of course, there were second-time founders who were raising a lot of capital even last year, at the start of last year, around even COVID. And there was a lot of failed founders and repeat founders. But what, in any ecosystem where there's development or there's a lot of capital that's coming into the system, there's going to be a lot of new founders, first-time founders, college founders, people who are working in startups today. And the whole Antler mission I loved was really creating a lot of first-time founders too, working with founders when someone hasn't even decided to become a founder, right? Literally, I go back to my own Yahoo days when I had not yet made the decision of becoming a founder, right? And I was super excited about that mission of Antler to really work with very smart talent, identify potential great founder talent. So these were the 3-4 reasons, right? And of course, at the end of the day, in a country like India, while obviously there's government and everything else that's trying to improve the infrastructure, assume that it's only companies and entrepreneurs that are going to change the trajectory of how the whole economy develops, right? It's not going to be the government, unfortunately. Government can fix infrastructure at max, but really the development of jobs, the development of new user behavior, the development of talent is only going to happen via entrepreneurship. So there's no so why only create one startup? Why can't I create 100 startups? It's very simple. So I just felt that force multiplying myself is probably far more useful than just creating one startup. So that was sort of, at the end of the day, the reason for taking on Antler. as an opportunity.
That is very inspirational, Rajiv. So, moving forward, as you mentioned about the early stage founders, the ones who are doing a startup for the first time, or the college founders. So, what do VCs exactly look forward to hear from these founders or expect from these founders while they are approaching them?
I think, tough to sort of say for all VCs, but I'll tell you at least at Antler, what are the 2, 3 things that we look at, right? One is what we call the founder market fit, right? Which is actually, let me take a step back. Let's say the first thing we look for is great founders, right? And I say great founders, I gave you the example at the start of my background, right? Which is, are you creating enough stuff when you're in campus? Are you creating enough stuff when you're in your company, right? What are the side projects you do? What are the side hustles you do? What are you kicked about? What are you coding? What are you developing? What is that passion? Whether that's to build an app or whether that's to float something within your audience. Is there that joy for creation? I think that's the first thing we look for in founders, right? Because the moment there's joy in creation, you will be a founder some point in your life, right? May not be right now. You might have educational things, you might have loans, you might have whatever, but you will become a founder at some point in time. The second is what we call the founder market fit, which is, why have you picked this space that you're picked up? Is it because of a very personal problem? Is it because you're really passionate? And how do you show your passion in that space? Is it because you've talked to a lot of customers? Is it because you had that particular problem? Did you work in that space before that you actually know what needs to be done? So that's the second piece, which is the founder market fit. If I were to just to keep it shorter, call out a big third bucket, that's what's the differential idea you have? Why do you think that the idea you have is differential? What is the unique insight you have? And how are you going to go differently compared to, let's say, someone else solving this problem? So these are really the three, the very creative creator founder market fit, and what's the differential insight that we look for.
Thanks for sharing those insights, Rajiv. So, picking up one question from the chat box: how to approach investors with idea when they are raising seed funding or pre-seed round, maybe the first round?
Investors at that very early stage, whether that's let's call it pre-seed or seed. In our jargon, when we say pre-seed, we talk about someone who's raising in the 0 to 1, where you don't even have a product, you're just building your product. And seed is usually used for just after product, right? Just you've launched your product, you're raising a seed round. So let me cover both, right? If you're looking for a seed round where you already have a product, you already have some little traction, the story is about your vision, who you are as a team, and what is your traction. Okay, what have you found on the customer and the product market fit? Okay, so that's the story that you go with your seed round. If it's a pre-seed round where you don't yet have a product and yet your traction, again, there are 3 things that investors look for. One is, what is the founder market fit? Why are you doing what you're doing? Second is, what is your vision and what's your differential insight towards that vision? And third is, who is the team you're pulling together to build this? That's it, right? Because you don't have anything else to show right at that moment. There's no traction, right? So there's not too much of a difference between seed and pre-seed. The only thing is the traction versus who is the founder and why are they building. Everything else is the same. At a pre-seed level, before you have product market fit, you really don't need to raise more than, let's say, 250K or 500K. Let's say, 1, 2, 3 crores is also enough. The moment you have traction, given the cost of talent in this market, you probably need in the millions of dollars to build a venture fundable business. So you raise anywhere from $1 to $5 million the moment you have any little traction. Because talent in this market is more expensive. If you're building a global product, you need more money to build that. So how much money you raise could also be dependent on which stage you are in.
That's interesting. So, what is Antler India Fellowship? I think you mentioned in the initial conversation as well. So, if you can
Sure.
give us more details on that, because most of the founders belong to the very early stages, maybe still in college or starting up their job.
So Antler India, of course, as Antler India, we work with founders and we do pre-seed stage funding. We do approximately a 250K check for around 10% at $2.5 million. But that's our core offering, right? Now, what we want to do with the Antler India Fellowship is we want to work with specifically college founders even before they've actually built out their product, which means imagine 4 to 6 months before they get ready for our pre-seed funding. We want to work with certain founders, maybe in the last year, maybe in the last minus 1 year, third year, specifically. And this is, while it is obviously open for MBA founders and arts and, but we are really looking for creators and builders, right? So maybe there's a high chance that you probably have an engineering degree or you're coding, that's pretty much it, right? So we want to work with builders, maybe 1, maybe 2 people maybe a combination of an engineer plus a non-engineer. And we want to really work with you for 4 months, okay? Between January and April of the first instance that we are doing, between January and April of coming year, we will go very deep into what we feel are the critical aspects before you actually pitch to us for pre-seed, right? Which is everything around business, everything around handling the personal aspects, everything around product and engineering, and everything around marketing, okay? So we go deeper into these 4 aspects over those 4 months. We get you a founder mentor. We somewhere help you be ready for the founder journey as well as assess you whether you're ready for the founder journey. Okay, so it's both, right? Because at the end of the 4 months, are you ready to pitch to us or not? Is the question that we have, right? If you're ready to pitch to us, you pitch to us and get the funding from us. So what we do for making you spend those 4 months is also to make sure that you absolutely can forget all of your financial worries about the next 12 to 24 months. So we give you a 15 lakh grant, which is an equity free grant. It's $20,000, no questions asked grant. And that's a lot of money, right? I mean, average college salaries in India are, let's say, 4 or 5 lakhs. And what we want to do is to make sure that founders or people who want to become founders don't have any worry about actually working in a job or any capital or any education loan or whatever else that they have taken, in college. Just go build this out and hopefully get funded by Antler. So we want to work with founders, want to build great institutions, funded by Antler, hopefully in the May-June time period. The Antler India Fellowship is really working with hopefully some of those founders 4 months before, 5 months before, giving them a grant and making sure that they are ready for that founder journey.
Thanks, Rajiv. So I think there are like bunch of questions raining in the chat box. So let's pick one or two from there. I'd like to pick this one first. What metrics should be taken care of while approaching VCs, and what should be the approximate number in these metrics in a B2C startup? So is there a criteria in Antler that you have set for yourself in terms of metrics or traction?
So I think it's very difficult to answer that question only because first of all, at Antler level, we don't need any metrics because we go in when the product is not even ready, right? As I explained, we are a pre-seed investor. We go in when you're just building the product, so there are no metrics for the product. But when you're going to a seed investor, what they look for more than a specific metric is they're looking for growth. Are you growing week on week? Are you growing month on month? That's more important than a particular metric. So I can't say you make 2 lakhs a month or 4 lakhs a month or 10 lakhs a month. It's very difficult to put a number. It's based on the business you are in. It's based on whether you're building a user-based business or a money-based business first, right? A lot of audience businesses don't make any money in the first 1 or 2 years. That's absolutely fine, right? But is your user growth happening week on week, month on month? Is it growing at least double digits every week, right? That's what investors look for at seed. The last 2 months, last 3 months, in your user traction, is it growing fast? I would say, beyond everything else, that's the number one metric everyone looks for in B2C. Outside of that, of course, what are customers saying about your product? Is it a great product experience? Is it a great customer experience? If you're buying a physical product, are customers saying good things about the product? Is your NPS, the net promoter score, is it high? So some of these are the metrics that investors look for in the very early days around the seed. What was your second question?
It was also around attraction only. So let's pick one more question from the chat box itself. To build the startup in a healthy way, how much equity should one give up in the early stages if it is a pre-seed or angel round?
I think in the pre-seed round, you should give up, I would say, not more than 10%. I think in the seed round, and what I call a pre-seed is anyone raising, let's say, 250 to 500K, right? So for that capital, any of the other pre-seed investors, you shouldn't give up more than 10%, and you probably don't need to raise to see if you have product market fit. You don't need to raise more than, let's say, 250 to 500K, because it's really you as a founder, maybe your co-founder, so that's 2 people, maybe 1 engineer, couple of engineers. So it's really a team of 4 or 5. You don't need, I'm talking about anywhere from 6 to 12 months. You don't need more than a couple of crores, in Indian rupees to be able to test this out, right? The moment you have some traction, you probably need to raise anywhere based on, again, the business, the sector you are in, how fast you want to grow. You could raise, $5 million also, which is, let's say, 35 crore rupees. You could raise $1 million also, which is, let's say, 7 to 10 crore rupees. And there is no specific, right or wrong here. In seed rounds, typically, because people expect you to dilute at least double digit, maybe 15-20% at those kind of valuations and or those kind of check sizes, right? It could be slightly higher also, but at a very broad ballpark, I would say pre-seed high single digit or very, very low double digit. In the seed round, maybe mid between in the teens, like 15 to 20%. After that, of course, it's very unpredictable based on the amount of capital you raise. It could be 20%, it could be 25%. It usually, goes around 20 to 25% the moment you raise capitals in the tens of millions of dollars.
Interesting. Thank you, Rajiv. One more question from Arun around customer research. So, how to validate an idea? Which mode should they use if they are in a very early stage when they do not have traction?
I think I'm just trying to customer from
I'll just
Arun.
answer the one second.
Yeah.
I'll just answer the question already on chat, but I'll just go through that. I think there is no one mode in terms of either should I do interviews or should I do a survey. I think it's a mix of both. When you're starting off initially and you have a hypothesis, you want to do detailed interviews with your possible users, right? And the users themselves could change, your target themselves could change, right? And when you say detailed interviews, not just leading questions, but detailed understanding of their lives, where your product fits in. I highly recommend this book called The Mom Test. It's a very small book, 150 odd pages, to understand what kind of questions to ask so that you don't get the answers that you want to hear, but the answers that will add value to figuring out if this is the idea that you want to build.
Nandini, there are a bunch of other questions I can see on the chat window around the fellowship, which I assume you're going to answer right
Yeah,
there.
I'm answering them one by one, sir.
Okay, awesome. And I think, by the way, see, the thing is, it's also important to understand that there's a lot of competition for the same capital, right? Whether, we've gotten 1,500 applications and we can only pick at max 10 people, right? VCs, every VC does maybe 15, 20 deals a year, right? And maybe this year this number has increased, but they see 5,000 startups. Every VC sees anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 startups every year, right? So there are only so many that are venture fundable because it looks, every VC looks at a foundation level, they look at three things. One is who's the founder. Second is what is the market you're going after, because VCs will never pick things which are very small in market size, because the entire VC industry is based on some of these becoming massive, and you can never be massive if the market itself is small, right? And the third is what's your differential insight and what's your product, right? At some, every VC is trying to make sure that all three are great. Even if only two of the three are great, VCs can still bet. But most likely, if it's the market that's small, VCs won't bet. If it's the founder that's weak, the VCs won't bet. So it's only the product that's weak, VCs might still be okay. So everyone is looking for the same, across. And that's why out of maybe 10,000 founders starting up, you only get 200 to 250, which is a very small percentage, which are actually funded a lot of capital, and the other 9,750 do not. Another 750 might end up raising capital, but they don't end up raising too much capital, or they don't grow fast enough, right? So you have 9,000 people who are left out of 10,000 startups every year, who are left with, unfortunately, not being able to raise. So this is sort of the funnel of India startups. And at some level, I think, as long as you get the market right, as long as you have a strong founding team, I would be surprised if you don't raise capital, pre-seed capital, at least in this market.
Thanks, Rajiv. Another question, I think, adding on to this is around why do VCs look at traction more than MVP or an idea? In general, maybe the question is formed.
Startup is actually very funnily, is not just what you think is a startup. A startup is actually defined as something that grows super fast. Okay. A startup, by definition of the word startup, means that you're growing at least 10-15% week on week, which essentially means that you're growing literally 3x or 4x compounded every year, right? So when VCs look for traction, they want to make sure that whatever you're at a seed stage, at a pre-seed stage, there is no growth because you don't have a product yet, right? So leave what we look for at pre-seed. We can't look for growth because there is no product yet. But the moment you have a product and that's not growing fast enough, then obviously it's a problem, because VCs, and I'll take again one step back, and then, and we have only 10 minutes. So I want to make sure I cover a lot of the other questions. But the way VC industry works, it's very important to understand, is VCs make bets, and VCs know that 50% of what the VCs bet will fail, will disastrously fail. Okay. 30% of what the VCs bet will have some kind of a return. Okay. But it is those 1 or 2 cases in 10, okay, which goes so fast, which is the Zomato or the Freshworks or the, whatever, MobiKwik or whatever else, which is actually going to return, because VCs also raise money to give you the money, right? We raise money from other investors before we give you the money. And what we have promised the other investors is we will give them a lot of money more. Otherwise, we can't do a second fund. And when we have to give that money back, only if there is a Freshworks or a Zomato in our profile, in our portfolio, can we give that money back over 10 years. And if we don't give the money back, then we tend to lose. And anything that the VC tends to make is only a percentage of what the money we give back, right? So VCs cannot operate if the traction is not great, Because if the traction is not great, if everyone is doing very okay, VCs cannot return the money, right? Because there will be some failures, and those failures will compensate for all the things that are doing okay. Which means VCs will always optimize for one or two big hits, which means that VCs will push every one of their portfolio companies to grow fast. Otherwise, you should not be raising money from VCs, and VCs cannot be in business.
That's very insightful, Rajiv. So I think you're running out of time. So I'll be asking the last question, which is around how do you judge the capabilities of the founder while they are applying for a pre-seed stage, or maybe at Antler India Fellowship? How do you judge their capabilities or team?
Everyone wants the answers on what we look for, right? I think it goes back in some level to, I think something that's very important, irrespective of the language that you use. You could explain the story in Hindi or Tamil or English or whatever. You will make sure that whatever language you explain it, we have someone who understands that language. But really, the first skill set is storytelling. You're selling a vision to us. You're selling a vision to 5 people who will join you. You're selling a vision to so many others whom you will encounter over the next few years. So the first skill is storytelling. Second is, I'm sort of not repeating. The first is actually founder market fit. Why are you doing what you're doing? The other is, have you been building stuff, right? These are two things that we will assess. And I'm not repeating it because I've already talked. Storytelling is certainly something very important. Two is, what functional skill set are you showing? Are you a strong engineer? Do you know your engineering stuff? Are you a strong product person? Are you a strong salesperson? But show us one functional skill set, okay, that you're really good at. Because if you're just a generalist and you're not good functionally in even one skill set, that means that you don't know how to go detail into something, okay? And we don't like that, right? Because we want founders to go detail into something, right? So it could be sales, it could be engineering, it could be product, it could be marketing. It doesn't matter what it is, but show us one strong skill set. So in addition to the creativity and the founder market fit, the two things that we do look for is storytelling ability and depth in one functional skill set. I'll keep it to that because, obviously there are other factors that we might look at, but at least these 3-4 cover the main things of what we look at. I can take 2 more questions.
Thanks, Rajiv. So there is one more question from Arpit, I guess. We started working on it after very strong validation. They're a team of 6 from KPMG, Mercantile, IBM, Oracle. He's a solo founder trying to pre-seed. Will it be the right time to raise a pre-seed round? And they are just building their MVP and launching it. So they do not have their traction. They have just launched their MVP or building it.
Pre-seed, by definition, you should raise when you have not launched, right? So today in India, compared to when I started Urban Ladder 10 years back, there is a lot more capital, right? There is capital in every stage. Okay. So when there is capital, you should use it, right? So I would say that you can dilute a very small percentage pre-seed and raise capital so that you don't have to worry about, let's say, spending some money on marketing or hiring the first or the second engineer. You don't have to dip into your own savings beyond a point. So I think you should raise capital at pre-seed. There are some people who maybe are doing it after 10 years of work experience where they can fund the pre-seed, which is fair. But younger folks who probably are not sitting on that much level of, let's say, savings from salary and stuff, absolutely, college founders or 25-year-old founders who probably don't have as much work absolutely you should raise a pre-seed round when you are building. Use that, get to traction, and then raise your seed round. And there have been a bunch of questions here, of course, on what's the right size of seed round, when to raise seed round. Today, you can raise capital if you have the network. And I mean, at Antler, we encourage a lot of first-time founders to raise capital with no major institutional background and stuff to raise at the stage at which they are building. As I said, we look for something which is kick-ass. We look for something that is, the founder is showing passion, storytelling, some depth. But yeah, I mean, you should raise money when you just started building.
Thanks, Rajiv. I think we can take up the last question from Meet. Do you think investor founder fit also very important? Because as important as the founder fit is, wrong investors can also hinder the growth. Your thoughts?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most important things. Of course, we didn't get to talk about it, but investor founder fit is, today you have a lot of investors. You have angels, you have syndicates, you have pre-seed investors, you have seed investors. There's a lot of capital available in the market, right? Especially if you're building anything which is remotely good. It is extremely important for you to get the vibe with investors because this is a 10-year journey, right? It's no different from dating or, a relationship or, figuring out a spouse or whatever else, right? Because if your startup does do well, it is a 10-year relationship. Anyone who enters your cap table, whether it's an angel or a syndicate or an investor, is going to be there for 10 years. It is better that you really make sure that you have the right vibe with the person, because if you don't, then that can come and bite you so badly later, right? What do you look for in an investor? One is, what is the excitement for this investor? Two is, what is the ability of this investor to be in future rounds? Three is, what is the investors, not just the passion, but what is the team like to interact? Is this very intrusive investor? Is this a very additive investor? And do a lot of ref checks on the investor. Investors will do a lot of ref checks on you. So you do your ref checks on investors, on other people that have raised money from this investor, right? Otherwise, you should never get an investor before you do your ref checks on the investor. And that's super important, right? So it's no different from any kind of, you're hiring talent, you're going to do a ref check, right? You should do that for your investor. You should do that for anyone that you're working with. So absolutely, I think it's extremely critical.
Thanks, Rajiv. I think we are running out of time, right? There are like bunch of questions still in the chat box.
Actually, I've answered almost all the questions. There's one question, Rajiv, I think you should answer. So Vishal Mishra's question, I think it's an important question about talking about failures of, not failing to raise, and it's not the end of a founder's journey if they don't raise from an investor.
Oh, absolutely. Failure to raise funds. So I can tell you, right, at Urban Ladder, we failed to raise after we had raised $100 million, right? 2019, we failed to raise, right? So it can happen at any stage for anyone, right? It's not just the first stage that will happen. It will happen at a much later stage also. There's so many companies that you would have seen, which wound up or which got shut down or whatever else, right? So I think sometimes maybe it is the end of the startup's journey also, right? It's very difficult to predict. And sometimes maybe it's not. Absolutely, there is no, if you don't, and this again goes back to a very foundational point, there are some kinds of businesses which are venture backable, and in the venture capital industry, you should raise capital, and it becomes very difficult to run those businesses at hyperscale without capital. But you could run, not every business, I think for every one venture funded business, there are probably 10 real businesses which don't need venture funding, okay, which can be funded purely by customer revenues, right? You don't need to hyperscale. You don't need to grow 5x every year. You don't need to get highly expensive talent. You can easily run those businesses, very profitable businesses, bootstrap businesses, great businesses. You don't need to raise venture funding for many of those. And raising venture funding will be the wrong thing. You as a founder, if you don't want to hyper grow, if you raise venture funding, it'll screw you so bad. If your business is not ready for venture funding and you raise capital, it'll screw you so bad. So I think you have to first understand whether this is a venture fundable business and you are a venture fundable founder who wants to grow these crazy, it's very easy to look at the Freshdesk IPO, Freshworks IPO or the Zomato IPO, but the number of heartaches and the number of times that some of those founders were very close to literally shut down, or the number of ups and downs that they have gone through in their life, right? Is just insane. So it's almost like I want to be Roger Federer, but without putting the hard work of a Roger Federer, right? You just don't understand as to what it is to be a venture founder. So I would say that be ready for crazy growth of you as a professional, of your company. And of course, when you have 2-3 other investors, you have to sort of always work in, I would say, collusion with some of these investors and make sure that you're spending time with evangelizing, with lot more stakeholders. It's no longer just your vision as a founder. So if you're about control, if you're about wanting to run it your own self and all of that stuff, you should probably not even have investors, right? Because then you want to run a solo founder company, you want to run a lifestyle business, you want to run it at your own pace, you should do it, but you don't have to raise venture capital. So I would say VC rejection and or not taking VC money is certainly not the end of the world. And it is absolutely fine that there are, for every one venture funded business, there will be 4-5 absolutely great businesses not raising venture capital.
Thanks, Rajiv. I think that's all in terms of the questions that we had. Anything in general that you would like to share, or any ending note that you would be happy to share that we can?
No, I think, obviously we're super excited to be in, India. It's only been 10 months for us. We already funded 14 startups. By the end of the year, maybe another 2-3 more. But we're making a bunch of changes, and we're super kicked about the Antler India Fellowship. We also, if you're a founder who believes that they're building and you're raising venture capital in the pre-seed stage, we focus on the pre-seed stage rather than the seed stage. But if you're not raised any institutional capital and you already have some traction, feel free to ping us, antler.co/India. That's okay. but we would obviously love to work with you in the first 12 months and not beyond that, as in obviously with you beyond that if we fund you. But so if you're just about building, if you're just about launched, please do ping us. But be ready for drilling, because we have seen 8,000 founders and we have only invested in 14. So that's sort of the, unfortunately or fortunately, the funnel for us. So yep, awesome to be here. Thank you so much for hosting me.
Thank you, Rajiv. It was pleasure hosting you. Yeah, so folks, I think 2-3 questions. Solo founders are not preferred. I think Nandini answered that question, that solo founders are also preferred. You can apply. Can we share the email ID here? Perfect. So thank you so much for joining in. We'll be beginning with the XF4 session at 3 p.m. So bye. Take care.